Hi, my name's Tex. I'm going to be running a quick demo just to showcase our additive manufacturing software Threads. I put together a really simple use case. So we'll be looking at a very simple engineering collaboration effort between a few engineers. We're just going to be discussing a simple part used for aerospace. We're going to have a really simple discourse about the part, make sure it's worthy for airworthiness. And then we'll finish the stage by generating a quick report of our collaborative efforts and moving on to our other software, which is our order management program for additive manufacturing. So I'm just going to share my screen with you and basically showcase the software. Just give me 2 seconds. This is a new tool for me. Here we go. Cool. So this is Threads. This is our engineering collaboration tool. So what I'll be doing here is using this tool to have some basic discourse between myself and two hypothetical team members. In this case, we're going to be reviewing a really simple part, which is just a spacer, which will be, going on to some kind of aerospace application being put onto some aircraft. And in this case, we need to discuss whether it's going to be worthy of the criteria set for being put onto a plane. Obviously, aerospace is an incredibly regulated industry, and certification is one of the biggest kind of labor-intensive, man-hour using processes. And we think this tool in this use case can be used to save quite a lot of time. So this is the home page when you're working on your threads. You can see it says My Threads up here, which are just the threads that I personally have created. But you can see if I go to all threads, I'm part of a workspace with, lots of different colleagues. They might have their own threads, and these will be all the public threads that are available to anyone from who's got access to the workspace. So when you do create a new thread, you can give it a name, give it a description. You can give it a tag, which will become very important later for categorization. You can give it a status and a priority. You can also make it public or private. And if I make a thread private, no one will have access to it unless I personally invite them. So looking at here, you've got some kind of high level information about the threads that you're working on. You've got your events, which will be pushed to that dashboard there, which I'll get onto in a second. And then you've got the threads. So if I just go into a thread here, what you've got is, like any other kind of chat tool, some basic discourse that's going on between you and your colleagues. So when you're getting started with a thread, you'll see the first message here is Kieran has said, "Hi guys, this thread is to kick off the airworthiness review for the AC blah, blah, blah spacer part. It's being proposed for the B52 wing fuel line bracket, etc., etc." So if I'm Kieran and I'm starting off this thread, the first thing I'm going to want to do is add colleagues, right? If I want to add contributors and they're already part of the workspace, i.e. they're probably part of my company, you can add them with a click of the button here. Or if they're external clients and you want to talk about a part, you can add them via email here, and they will just have access to this thread. So you'll have an isolated area to have that conversation with external clients. Once those people have been added to the workspace, the next thing you're going to probably want to do is share some kind of data. The first thing you do when you want to share either files or URL links or CAD models, you simply go to add files here, you give it a name and description, and if you do want to click add a CAD file, just a step or an STL file will work just fine. You can also add a URL link here or multiple files at once. So just to give you an idea with some of the files I've already added to this workspace, first thing is the spacer that we're talking about. So when you add any kind of CAD model, you'll see that there's this optional button here to take you into the space to view the CAD model. This area is really good for if you want to have any kind of conversation around design decisions. You might notice that something's wrong. You can open up a chat bar here, You can ask what is the thickness, or reply to your colleagues in this area. And anything that's said here will also be relayed back into this main thread environment as well. You can see the thread 3D log with any comments is made over here. So you've added your CAD model, you've added your colleagues. You're also going to be wanting to add some kind of files. So just to show you the model that we're working with, you might start with a technical drawing of the spacer, and you might also start with a product sheet, let's say. So this is the spacer drawing, product sheet, etc. This is the model that we're working with. And you're going to have to want to, work together with your team to fix some of the issues. So we do have an airworthiness certification criteria that I've uploaded onto this thread as well. And as you start talking with your teams, no doubt issues are going to arise. So, for example, you guys might be talking and someone might go, the material spec isn't clear yet, for example. Now, one of the main things about threads is that you want to keep track of all conversations as they're happening, so that in the future you can retrospectively go back and understand what the design decisions were, which is always super important for coming back, revisiting a conversation, and gauging why something changed and when it changed. So if you want to do that, you can do it manually, and it's really easy. You create what's called an event. So in this case, the material spec might not be clear yet. You might want to raise an issue, or you might want to ask someone a question and highlight the fact that a question is being asked here. It's really easy to do that. You can select an assignee if you want to, and it'll be pushed to their event dashboard, which I showed you in the home page. And you can also give it a due date as well. And in that way, this place, Threads can act like kind of a project management tool. If you want to assign someone an action for next week, you can do that, and they will be reminded and notified of that. I'm going to just close that thread, that event selection. So as you're kind of talking, I've added some kind of fictitious questions and decisions and discussions down here, but this is pretty reflective of what you're probably gonna see in a typical design conversation when you're working with engineers or project managers or whatever it might be, right? The other tool that we have is we do have an AI assistant, and this is really useful for if you are working kind of asynchronously or with someone who's in an office that might be in another part of the world. ThreadsBot, as we call it, is super good at going and gathering information for you, in accordance to what's being shared on this thread. So it can be as simple as finding some really empirical data, like what is the thickness of the spacer, for example, and it will go through and find that answer for you really quickly just from the data sheets that have been shared. But I've also shared, quite complicated documents such as the criteria for airworthiness, which is what we're talking about now. Okay, and if I want to, a basic summary of what that document says, because it might be, over 100 pages long, you can go, what criteria need to be filled or completed for the spacer to be airworthy. Okay. And so this is a kind of a slightly more complex question. What it'll do, it'll go through the documents and come up with a summary of the tasks that need to be done. And I might want to cross-reference these in what we've spoken about so far. And if I see that there's something that we're missing, like a fatigue test, the spacer should exceed the required fatigue cycles, I can say, we need to run a fatigue test by next Thursday, for example, which is a pretty this will be a pretty common problem that comes up. And another part of the AI tool that helps as we're having these conversations is you'll see this light bulb that crops up as you're going back and forth with your colleagues. This will suggest event creation for you. So that the manual process I showed you earlier with creating an event, this will suggest them for you and provide scheduling for them as well. So if I say for next Thursday, it'll put a deadline in someone's calendar for next Thursday. which is super useful in terms of just saving time and making the whole process a bit less manual. So, we've had with our discourse here, there have been some issues. Let's say they've been resolved and you've come to the stage of the design process. Oh, and by the way, just when you are designing the part, if you want to add iterations to your if you want to add iterations to your design, you simply just choose a new file version and it will update the version history. So this is version 1, but going onto whatever CAD software you use and making edits will probably be a part of the iterative design process, and updating the model is super easy. Once that's all done and you're kind of confident with where you've landed on the part, the other feature that we have, which is super important and crops up all the time with things like certification, is report generation and putting whatever conversation's been had or whatever data has been shared into some kind of presentable report. So we've come up with a feature that generates those summaries for you. So if you see here under settings, you can go down to the bottom and you'll see summary templates. And I will technical data package. No, which one are we? Spacer. Here we go. Spacer airworthiness certification report. So this is where you have to do a tiny bit of manual work for your report generation. So I'm sure most of you by now are familiar with AI prompts. You basically just have to give it a few AI prompts. So what's the description? I want to generate a formal engineering certification report. What's the context? Generate a formal engineering certification report, etc. It's really simple stuff. You then have to just define what sections you want. So report title with a small prompt, test results, risk assessment, etc. Once all that is done, that's all the manual work over, that's all the hard work over, and you just have to order them in the right order here. And once you're satisfied with that, what you do is you can go to generate a new summary and you'll give it a name, certification report. Select a primary thread. So the primary thread we're working on here is Spacer airworthiness review. What's the tag? I'll go with Spacer and certification. Now, you can see that it's pulling information from 3 threads, which means that there are 3 threads which contain information that pertains to this Spacer project, right? Once all that's done, you can click export. And I'll show you the report that was generated from that summary, just because it takes a second. Oh, and by the way, just in terms of when you're creating threads, what's really useful, sometimes you want to break out into a conversation that might not be totally valuable to be included within this line of messaging. So you can add related threads. Relating threads to each other is what helps the report summary draw information from the correct threads. So once you've generated that report, I can show you an example of the report that this generated. And bearing in mind, this is just pulling information from a very limited amount of messages and a few files that I shared. So it's not overly extensive, but I think it gets the point across. It generates all this from the information that was shared in that thread. So you can imagine that if there's a much more complicated part and a much more extensive series of conversations, that this can save tens or even hundreds of hours in terms of collating and gathering information for you to report on afterwards. So that's the report generation. Finally, once you're kind of done with this design stage and you're happy to move on to the production stage, we do integrate with our other software called Flows, which is basically our order intake, order management type software. Now, I'm not going to get too into it. I'll save that for another webinar or demo, but you can see our order here. So this is one order. I've actually inserted 2 line items. So you can see the spacer here is one of those line items. You get an automatic quote with that order through this tool. And this is depending on the additive manufacturing software that you're going to, additive manufacturing methods you're going to be using, obviously. But just to show you a preview of the line item here, you can see you've got the spacer, and you've then, it's been attached a prep workflow, which is kind of a pre-production thing. And you can also see further on down the line, you can give it specific work instructions. So these are all the depowder, disassembly. These are post-production steps. But if you want to add any workflow instructions here, you can. These can be custom built for you guys as well. And yeah, from then on, we get to the kind of production stage of everything. But I hope that you can kind of see how this environment is conducive to, or kind of lends itself to, the kind of tracing issues that are important for having these engineering conversations. There's a few features I haven't really touched on. Something else that's kind of cool, I mean, I've only got 20 minutes and it says 4 minutes left roughly. I'll show you the live view. So as you're creating events, what's kind of cool is it will create a kind of timeline of what's happened. So you know that you can visit from a high level perspective. In a few months' time, let's say you wanted to go and find out what happened, there was an action here, there was a question here, etc., which is kind of cool to go and look back on from a high level. So that's basically Threads, and what I wanted to show Threads for that use case. I'll stop sharing my screen now. How do I do this? How do I stop sharing my screen? I'm not sure. But I'm looking in the chat to see if anyone has any questions. Derek, I think you might be typing. Oh, thanks, Derek. Appreciate it. Okay, cool. I'm going to end the event there. Derek, it was great to hear from you. And yeah, cool. This will be up on the website for future reference. So that's cool.